In the vastness of a North American forest, where towering pines stood majestically and snow blanketed the ground in a white mantle, lived Tarek, a young tiger with amber eyes and vibrant fur. It was Christmas Eve, and while the other animals in the forest prepared for celebrations, Tarek wandered restlessly, his tail whipping through the cold air in frustration. From a young age, Tarek stood out for his unmatched strength and agility. He hunted with a skill that left other predators in awe, and his courage was legendary among the forest's inhabitants. However, something tormented him, a feeling of emptiness that none of his achievements seemed to fill. That chilly morning, Tarek decided to climb the highest peak in the area, determined to once again prove his worth. With powerful leaps and sharp claws, he ascended the mountain, ignoring the biting wind and the snow that piled up in his fur. Upon reaching the summit, he roared toward the horizon, hoping to feel the satisfaction of victory. But the echo of his roar only amplified the emptiness in his chest. As he descended the mountain, Tarek passed by the stream that wound its way through the forest. There, as always, sat Balthazar, the old frog, perched on his favorite rock. His small, wise eyes watched the constant flow of the water with a serenity that intrigued the young tiger. Balthazar was an enigmatic figure in the forest. He rarely moved from his spot by the stream, but when he spoke, his words carried the weight of decades of observation and reflection. Younger animals found him strange, but the elders respected him deeply. Irritated by the old frog's apparent inactivity, Tarek approached, his paws leaving deep imprints in the snow. "Why do you waste your time here, old frog?" Tarek growled, his voice a mix of disdain and curiosity. "There's a world out there to conquer, adventures to be lived." Balthazar slowly turned his eyes toward the tiger, a mysterious smile on his lips. "And what have you conquered today, young Tarek?" he asked in a calm, deep voice. The question caught Tarek by surprise. He opened his mouth to respond, but realized he didn't have a satisfactory answer. His climb to the highest peak had not brought him the satisfaction he expected. "Look at the water, Tarek," Balthazar continued, turning his gaze back to the stream. "It doesn't rush, it doesn't try to prove its worth, yet it shapes the hardest rocks, nourishes the entire forest, and flows on quietly." Tarek huffed, impatient. "Water is just water. It has no choice but to flow. We, predators, are born to conquer, to leave our mark on the world." At that moment, a small squirrel crossed Tarek's path, carrying an acorn almost larger than itself. The tiger instinctively tensed, ready to pounce for an easy catch. "Wait!" Balthazar's voice sounded, surprisingly firm. "Observe." Reluctantly, Tarek held back his impulse and watched the squirrel. The small creature, oblivious to the danger it had almost faced, carefully deposited the acorn in a hiding spot in the snow, covering it with leaves. Then it hurried off in search of more provisions. "What do you see?" Balthazar asked. Tarek frowned. "A foolish squirrel, storing food it will probably forget." Balthazar smiled. "I see foresight, care for the future. I see a small being contributing to the cycle of life in the forest. That acorn, if not found, could become a new tree in spring." The tiger fell silent, pondering the frog's words. For the first time, he began to question whether his relentless pursuit of achievements was truly the path to the satisfaction he longed for. As the afternoon wore on, the sounds of the forest changed. Christmas carols echoed among the trees as the animals prepared for the evening's celebration. Tarek felt a pang of loneliness, realizing that his constant quest for challenges had distanced him from the community. "The night of Christmas approaches," Balthazar said softly. "Perhaps it's time to seek a different kind of achievement, young tiger, one that isn't measured by the heights of mountains climbed or the number of prey captured." Udi, with those words, the old frog closed his eyes, seemingly slipping into a deep meditation. Tarek stood there, watching the stream, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. The twilight's glow began to color the sky, and in the distance, the preparations for the Christmas celebration came to life. For the first time in a long while, Tarek felt genuine curiosity. What did Balthazar mean by a different kind of achievement? And why, despite all his skills and strength, did he feel so empty inside? With one last glance at the still frog, Tarek slowly walked away from the stream, his steps heavy in the fresh snow. As he made his way towards the lights and sounds of the Christmas celebration, he didn't realize he was taking the first steps on a journey much deeper and more meaningful than any he had ever undertaken. The Pine Heights Forest, as it was known by its animal inhabitants, stretched for miles over rugged terrain in the heart of the United States. During winter, the landscape transformed into a fairy tale setting, with branches covered in snow and frozen lakes reflecting the silvery light of the moon. Tarek, born and raised in this wild environment, was the last of a lineage of tigers that had inhabited the region for generations. His ancestors, originally from East Asia, had been brought to a wildlife sanctuary decades ago. Over time, they adapted to the local climate and fauna, becoming living legends among the forest's inhabitants. The young tiger carried the weight of this heritage on his broad shoulders. His vibrant orange fur with black stripes contrasted dramatically with the snow, making him an impressive sight as he moved through the forest. His eyes, a deep amber, reflected sharp intelligence and a constant restlessness. From a young age, Tarek had been taught the importance of being the strongest, the fastest, and the most fearless. His mother, a wise tigress named Nala, had tried to balance these lessons with teachings about compassion and wisdom, but Tarek had always been more drawn to the stories of great hunts and epic battles told by the older tigers. As he grew, Tarek excelled in all physical skills, but struggled to find genuine connections with the other animals in the forest. His relentless pursuit of challenges isolated him, creating an invisible barrier between him and the rest of the community. On the other hand, Balthazar was a well-known and respected figure among all. The old frog, with his olive-green skin marked by dark spots that resembled the wrinkles of age, had lived through more than 50 winters. His wisdom came not only from longevity, but from a life dedicated to observation and reflection. Born in a small pond in the heart of the forest, Balthazar spent his youth exploring the surroundings, absorbing knowledge from every creature he encountered. Over time, he realized that his true vocation was to be a counselor and mediator. He settled by the stream, where the constant murmur of water helped him maintain calmness and mental clarity. Animals from the forest often sought Balthazar's advice, or simply enjoyed his soothing presence. From small squirrels worried about storing nuts to confused bears contemplating the right moment to hibernate, everyone found comfort in the old frog's gentle words and practical wisdom. The relationship between Tarek and Balthazar had always been one of mutual fascination, yet with a certain distance. The tiger respected the frog's wisdom, but often grew frustrated with what he perceived as passivity. Balthazar, in turn, saw in Tarek a great potential, obscured by impatience and a desire for immediate recognition. On that Christmas Eve, the Pine Heights forest was especially lively. The deer were decorating the trees with garlands of pine cones and wild berries. The owls practiced Christmas carols, their melodious voices echoing among the branches. Even the bears, normally hibernating this time of year, had decided to postpone their deep sleep to join in the festivities. In the center of the forest, a large clearing was being prepared for the celebration. A massive pine tree had been chosen as the community's Christmas tree, its roots firmly planted in the ground, symbolizing the connection of all inhabitants to the forest they called home. While most of the animals busied themselves with festive preparations, Tarek wandered around, feeling out of place. The Christmas spirit that filled the air seemed to amplify his sense of isolation. He watched from a distance as families of deer helped their fawns hang ornaments. Squirrels shared their provisions for the grand feast, and birds flew in formation, creating festive patterns in the sky. The contrast between the collective joy and his own inner turmoil was striking. For the first time in a long while, Tarek found himself wishing to be part of something greater than his individual accomplishments. The words of Balthazar echoed in his mind, suggesting that perhaps there was more to life than being the strongest or the fastest. As night fell and the first stars began to dot the winter sky, Tarek found himself involuntarily returning to the stream, where Balthazar remained in his silent contemplation. Something was about to change, and the young tiger, even without fully understanding, felt he was on the brink of an important discovery. As Christmas night progressed, the excitement in Pine Heights Forest reached its peak. Tarek, still restless, watched the celebrations in the central clearing from a distance. The aroma of pine trees and the treats prepared for the feast filled the air, mingling with the sounds of laughter and Christmas carols. Determined to better understand what Balthazar had hinted at regarding a different kind of achievement, Tarek returned to the stream. To his surprise, the old frog was not in his usual spot. For the first time in years, Balthazar's rock was empty. Intrigued and slightly worried, Tarek followed the course of the stream, his senses alert. The sound of the flowing water guided him, but something else caught his attention. A faint whimper of pain, almost imperceptible to less trained ears. Following the sound, Tarek found Balthazar fallen near a steep ravine. The old frog had slipped on the ice and injured one of his legs. Despite the obvious pain, Balthazar maintained his serene expression. "Ah, young Tarek," said Balthazar, his voice as calm as ever. "It seems my journey to observe the Christmas stars has been interrupted." Tarek, accustomed to relying only on his own strength, felt momentarily lost. I can help," he offered hesitantly. Balthazar smiled. "Your help would be much appreciated. But remember, sometimes true strength lies in knowing when to be gentle." With surprising care for a predator of his size, Tarek used his powerful claws to create a small sled of branches and leaves. Gently, he placed Balthazar in the makeshift vehicle and began to pull him back to the central clearing. During the journey, Tarek was surprised by Balthazar's calmness, who took the opportunity to point out the beauties of the night forest. The moonlight shining on the frozen leaves, the pattern of the stars in the sky, the distant sounds of the celebrations. "Look, Tarek," said Balthazar, pointing to a bird's nest. "That family of sparrows took in a small orphaned mouse. They may not be of the same kind, but they understood that the spirit of Christmas is about compassion and unity." Tarek watched, fascinated. He had never before paid attention to these small details of life in the forest. Always focused on his own skills and achievements, he was beginning to notice a world of interactions and beauties he had ignored. As they approached the central clearing, they were met with expressions of concern and surprise. Seeing the mighty tiger Tarek carefully pulling a sled with the old Balthazar was an unprecedented sight. Luna, a young owl known for her curiosity, flew over to them. "Tarek, what happened to Balthazar? Did you hurt him?" she asked, her voice a mix of fear and accusation. Tarek felt a pang of pain at the assumption. Was this how others saw him, as a constant threat? Before he could respond, Balthazar intervened. "No, my dear Luna, Tarek saved me. I slipped near the ravine and he found me. Without his help, I would have missed our Christmas celebration." A murmur of admiration swept through the crowd of animals. Tarek, usually confident and even arrogant, felt strangely vulnerable under the gazes of gratitude and respect. Olivia, the matriarch of the deer, stepped forward. "Tarek, your actions show the true spirit of Christmas. Please join us in the celebration. We have long awaited your inclusion in our community." The heartfelt invitation took Tarek by surprise. He looked at Balthazar, who nodded encouragingly. As the other animals helped Balthazar settle comfortably, Tarek found himself at the center of a celebration that, for the first time, truly included him. Rabbits offered carrots, squirrels shared their nuts, and even the timid deer approached without fear. However, The joy of the moment was interrupted by a distant growl. The animals turned, alarmed, recognizing the sound of a pack of wolves that occasionally invaded the forest. Gridlock, the leader of the wolves, emerged from the shadows with his pack. His hungry eyes scanned the clearing, fixing on the offerings of the Christmas feast. "What a lovely party," growled Gridlock, his teeth glinting in the moonlight. "It would be a shame if something were to happen to it." The smaller animals shrank back in fear. Tarek felt a wave of protection that he had never experienced before. It was no longer just about proving his strength. It was about defending those who had, for the first time, accepted him. Stepping forward, Tarek positioned himself between the wolves and the forest community. His powerful roar echoed through the clearing, a clear warning to Gridlock and his pack. The tension was palpable. Gridlock, though impressed, didn't back down immediately. "A solitary tiger against a pack of wolves? Those are bad odds," Striped One. Tarek was about to respond when he felt a presence at his side. To his surprise, Olivia, the doe, had positioned herself next to him. Soon, other animals joined in. The owls, the bears, even the small squirrels. Together, they formed an impressive front. Balthazar, from his resting place, watched the scene with a wise smile. Christmas had brought a lesson that no individual achievement could teach: the strength of community and unity. As Tarek and the forest animals stood against Gridlock and his pack, Luna, the young owl who had initially questioned Tarek's intentions, flew silently to the top of a nearby tree. Her keen eyes scanned the forest around, searching for any sign of reinforcements for the wolves. She felt guilty for doubting Tarek and was determined to make up for her initial distrust. Meanwhile, a group of squirrels, led by the clever Nico, began to move discreetly among the trees. They carried small bags of aromatic seeds, a gift they had prepared for the celebration. Nico had a plan: to use the strong scent of the seeds to confuse the wolves' keen sense of smell. Nearby, a young deer named Bambi watched the scene with a mix of fear and fascination. He had always been taught to flee from danger, but seeing Tarek and the other animals united made him question if there were other ways to face threats. Gridlock, noticing the unexpected unity of the forest animals, hesitated. His pack, though fierce, was not used to facing such organized resistance. He cast a glance at his companion Sombra, seeking guidance. Sombra, more perceptive than Gridlock, noticed something the others had overlooked. At the edges of the clearing, several young animals of various species watched the scene, trembling in fear. She saw an opportunity. "Gridlock," she whispered, "the young ones. We can use them to our advantage." The wolf leader nodded, a cruel smile forming on his snout. He stepped forward, his voice laced with false cordiality. "How foolish of me," said Gridlock, "to interrupt such a familial celebration. Perhaps we can come to an agreement. After all, it is Christmas, isn't it?" Tarek, sensing something was off, remained alert. He noticed Gridlock's gaze subtly shifting toward the edges of the clearing. At that moment, Bambi, inspired by the courage of the others, stepped forward. "What do you mean by agreement?" asked the young deer, his voice trembling slightly. Gridlock smiled, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Oh, just a little sharing of the feast. And maybe the assurance that we can come back for more visits in the future." Meanwhile, Luna, from her elevated perch, noticed the subtle movement of some wolves breaking away from the main group, circling the clearing towards the unprotected young animals. She needed to alert the others, but a sudden movement could trigger an immediate attack from the wolves. Nico and his squirrels, oblivious to the imminent danger facing the young ones, began to scatter aromatic seeds, creating a curtain of scents that slowly started to confuse the wolves. Balthazar, observing everything from his resting place, recognized the multiple layers of the situation. He saw the wolves' strategy, Bambi's budding courage, the squirrel's plan, and Luna's vigilance. The old frog knew that the outcome of this night would depend on how all these elements intertwined. With a discreet movement, Balthazar beckoned Tarek closer. "Young tiger," he whispered, True strength is not always in muscles or claws. Sometimes it lies in the ability to see the bigger picture and connect the dots. Intrigued by the wise frog's words, Tarek began to observe the scene with new eyes. He noticed Luna's nervousness, the squirrel's furtive movements, Bambi's courageous yet inexperienced stance, and Sombra's calculating gaze. Suddenly, everything clicked in his mind. The wolves were not there merely for a feast. They had a more sinister plan. Tarek realized he needed to act quickly, but not impulsively as he had in the past. He needed to coordinate all the elements to his advantage. With a low roar, Tarek drew everyone's attention. "Gridlock," he said, his voice heavy with newfound authority, "you speak of agreements, but your eyes betray your true intentions. This forest is not just mine to defend, it is ours." As he spoke, Tarek subtly gestured to Luna, indicating the edges of the clearing. The young owl understood immediately and prepared to act. At the same time, he stomped the ground 3 times, a signal he had established with the squirrels for moments of danger. The tension in the clearing reached its peak. Gridlock, realizing that his plan had been uncovered, prepared to give the signal for attack. But Tarek, for the first time in his life, was not thinking solely of his own glory. He was ready to lead, protect, and unite. The air in the clearing was thick with tension. Gridlock, his fierce eyes fixed on Tarek, was poised to order the attack. Sombra, at his side, remained alert, ready to direct part of the pack toward the defenseless young ones. In that critical moment, Tarek did something surprising. Instead of roaring or showing his claws, he calmly sat down, his relaxed posture sharply contrasting with the tense atmosphere. "Gridlock," Tarek spoke, his voice unexpectedly soft. "Look around you. What do you see?" Confused by the tiger's unexpected demeanor, Gridlock hesitated. His eyes scanned the clearing, noticing for the first time the details of the festive celebration, the garlands on the trees, the aroma of festive food, the twinkling lights reflecting off the snow. Tarek continued, "I see a united community celebrating a special night. I see strength in diversity, not in domination. And I see hunger and loneliness in the eyes of your pack." These words caught Gridlock by surprise. He looked at his fellow wolves and for the first time noticed the weariness and malnourishment in their bodies. Seizing the moment of hesitation, Luna flew silently, alerting the parents about the danger their young ones faced. Discreetly, the families began to regroup, bringing the little ones to the center of the clearing. Nico and his squirrels, understanding Tarek's signal, started to spread the aromatic seeds even more intensely, creating a curtain of scents that not only confused the wolves, but also attracted them with its delicious aroma. Bambi, inspired by Tarek's calmness, stepped forward. "Why did you really come?" the young deer asked, his voice now steady. "Not to attack, but because you need help, right?" Sombra, surprised by the deer's insight, lowered her guard slightly. "Our territory has been destroyed by humans," she admitted reluctantly. "We have nowhere to go, nor anything to eat." A murmur of compassion rippled through the crowd of animals. Olivia, the matriarch of the deer, approached Tarek. "Perhaps," she suggested, "we can find a solution that benefits everyone." Balthazar, watching everything from his resting place, smiled. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the true spirit of Christmas manifesting through compassion and unity. Tarek slowly rose, his imposing figure now radiating not threat but protection. "Gridlock Sombra," he said, "this forest is vast. There is space and resources for everyone if we work together. This night is about renewal and hope. Why don't we turn it into a new beginning?" The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected sound. The whimper of a wolf pup, hidden in the shadows behind Sombra. The small wolf, thin and trembling, timidly stepped forward. This was the decisive moment. Without hesitation, Olivia approached the pup with a branch of fresh berries in her mouth. "Here," she said gently, Everyone deserves to eat on this special night." Olivia's gesture triggered a wave of similar actions. Squirrels offered nuts, rabbits brought carrots, and even the bears shared honey they had saved for winter. Gridlock, visibly moved, looked at Sombra and then at his pack. Years of struggle for survival had hardened their hearts, but the unexpected generosity of the forest animals was melting that layer of ice. "Perhaps," Gridlock finally said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "we have something to learn from you about the true meaning of strength and community." Tarek, sensing that the moment was right, extended his paw in a gesture of peace. "Join us," he offered, "not as invaders or enemies, but as new members of our community. We have much to learn from one another." Sombra was the first to accept, placing her paw over Tarek's. Gridlock followed suit, and soon wolves and forest animals were mingling, sharing food and stories. Balthazar, with the help of some animals, was brought to the center of the clearing. His eyes sparkled with satisfaction as he witnessed the transformation that had taken place. "Tarek," called the old toad, "come here, please." As the tiger approached, Balthazar smiled. "You found true strength tonight, my young friend. Not in domination or conquest, but in the ability to unite, to see beyond appearances, and to find solutions where others see only conflict." Tarek felt a wave of emotion he had never experienced before. It wasn't the pride of an individual achievement, but something deeper and more meaningful. The Christmas celebration in the Pine Heights forest took on a new significance that night. It was not just a party, but a symbol of renewal, unity, and hope. And at the center of it all was Tarek, the tiger, who learned that true strength comes from the heart and the ability to bring others together. In the days following Christmas night, the Pine Heights forest experienced remarkable transformation. The decision to welcome Gridlock and his pack of wolves brought challenges and opportunities that no one had anticipated. Tarek, now seen as a respected leader, found himself at the center of many important decisions. His physical strength, once used primarily for individual feats, was now directed towards helping build new shelters for the wolves and reorganizing hunting territories. One morning, while helping to move fallen logs to create a protective barrier around the wolves' new settlement, Tarek noticed Gridlock watching him thoughtfully. "Something on your mind, Gridlock?" Tarek asked, pausing his work. The wolf hesitated before responding. "I'm trying to understand why you helped us that night. You could have easily chased us away." Tarek reflected for a moment. "Because I learned that true strength doesn't lie in dominating others, but in uplifting everyone. Together we are stronger." This conversation was interrupted by Luna, who gracefully landed nearby. "Tarek, Gridlock," she said, "we have a situation at the creek. Some beavers are worried about the impact of the new wolf settlement on their dams." The news illustrated perfectly the challenges of the new dynamic in the forest. Tarek and Gridlock exchanged glances and, without words, agreed to address the situation together. When they arrived at the creek, they found a visibly agitated group of beavers, led by an elderly beaver named Dente de Ferro. On the other side, some young wolves looked confused and defensive. "These wolves are disrupting our work," exclaimed Dente de Ferro. "Their footprints are destabilizing the creek's banks." One of the young wolves, named Lua Nova, retorted, "But we need access to water. We're not doing anything wrong." Tarek observed the scene, recalling Balthazar's lessons about seeing the bigger picture. He noticed how the beavers worked tirelessly to maintain their dams, and how the wolves, used to living in drier areas, didn't fully understand the delicate balance of the creek's ecosystem. "Friends," Tarek began, his voice calm but firm, "I see that both sides have valid needs. But what if, instead of viewing this as a conflict, we see it as an opportunity for mutual learning?" Gridlock, following Tarek's example, added, "Lua Nova, you and the others could learn from the beavers about how to interact with the aquatic environment without causing damage." Dente de Ferro, surprised by the conciliatory approach, pondered for a moment. "And perhaps Perhaps we could teach building techniques that would allow the wolves to create safe passages to access the water. The tension in the air began to dissipate. Luna, who had been observing from a nearby branch, flew to the center of the group. "I could oversee from above," she offered, "and alert you to any problems or changes in the creek's flow." The collaborative solution not only resolved the immediate conflict, but also set a precedent for future interactions among the different species in the forest. As they returned to the central clearing, Tarek and Gridlock discussed the events of the day. "You know," said Gridlock, "I always thought leading meant having all the answers, but you showed me that sometimes it means asking the right questions and trusting in collective wisdom." Tarek nodded, recalling how he used to think. "We're all learning, Gridlock. Every challenge is an opportunity for us to grow together." When they arrived at the clearing, they were greeted by a heartwarming scene. Young ones of various species, including wolves, played together under the watchful eyes of their parents. Bambi was teaching some wolf pups how to identify edible plants, while Nico and his squirrels were showing adult wolves how to store food efficiently for the winter. Balthazar, who was observing from his favorite spot by the creek, called Tarek over. "Look," said the old toad, pointing to the harmonious scene. "This is the result of your leadership, not just peace, but growth and mutual understanding." Tarek felt a wave of emotion as he realized the impact of his actions. The Pine Heights forest was not just a place of coexistence, it was becoming an example of how different species could not only live together, but thrive through collaboration and mutual respect. As the weeks passed, the Pine Heights forest faced new challenges that tested the newly formed alliance among its inhabitants. The winter grew harsher, and food scarcity began to be felt, particularly for the newly arrived wolves, who were still not fully adapted to the new environment. Tarek, aware that the true test of his leadership was only beginning, called a meeting with representatives from all species. In the center of the clearing, surrounded by animals of all sizes and types, the tiger spoke. "Friends, we are facing difficult times. The winter is long, and our resources are dwindling, but together we can find solutions that none of us could discover alone." Gridlock, now thinner due to the scarcity of prey, stepped forward. "My pack is used to hunting, but we don't want to disrupt the balance we've built here. How can we contribute without causing harm?" The question hung in the air, laden with tension. It was then that Bambi, the young deer, surprised everyone with a bold suggestion. "What if the wolves helped us find and remove sick or weak animals from the herds? This would strengthen our populations and provide food for the wolves." A murmur of astonishment swept through the assembly. The idea of prey and predators collaborating in this way was revolutionary. Olivia, the matriarch of the deer, initially hesitant, pondered the proposal. "It's a risky idea, but if we can establish clear rules and mutual trust, this could benefit everyone." Luna, who had become a sort of messenger between the different groups, added, "I could oversee from above, ensuring everything is done according to the agreement." Tarek watched as the discussion unfolded, surprised and proud to see the animals learning to collaborate and think in innovative ways. He realized that his role now was more of a facilitator than a unilateral decision-maker. "These are excellent ideas," Tarek said, "but we need to ensure that everyone feels safe and respected in this new arrangement." It was at this moment that Balthazar, who had been brought to the meeting on a small litter made of leaves, spoke with his wise voice. "Perhaps we could establish a council with representatives from all species. This council could oversee the hunts and ensure that the rules are followed." Balthazar's suggestion was met with general approval. In the days that followed, the council was formed and new practices were implemented. The wolves, guided by Luna and other flying observers, began to work alongside the herbivores to maintain healthy populations. However, not everything went smoothly. There were moments of tension and misunderstandings. One night, a young and impulsive wolf, ignoring the established rules, attacked a healthy deer. The incident threatened to destabilize the fragile peace. Tarek found himself facing his greatest challenge yet. He knew that his reaction to this event could either strengthen or destroy everything they had built. Gathering everyone again, Tarek addressed the situation head-on. What happened is serious, but we cannot let this undo all the progress we have made. We need to learn from this mistake and strengthen our unity. Gridlock, embarrassed by the behavior of a member of his pack, proposed, the wolf responsible should be punished, but also re-educated. Perhaps he could work directly with the deer, learning to respect them and understand their value beyond being prey. Gridlock's proposal surprised everyone, especially the deer. Olivia, after a moment of reflection, agreed. We accept as long as there is constant supervision, and the wolf demonstrates true remorse and willingness to change. This incident, although challenging, ultimately strengthened the bonds between the species. The animals realized that they could overcome even the most serious breaches of trust through dialogue and mutual understanding. As winter progressed, the forest of tall pines became an example of cooperation and adaptation. The wolves learned food conservation techniques from the squirrels. The deer and other herbivores discovered new food sources thanks to the wolves' knowledge of lesser-known plants. The beavers taught construction techniques that benefited everyone, creating warmer and safer shelters. Tarek, observing all of this, felt transformed. His journey from a solitary leader focused on individual prowess to a facilitator of harmony and collective growth was complete. He understood that his true strength lay not in his claws or fangs, but in his ability to unite others and inspire the best in each one. One night, while the forest rested peacefully under a blanket of snow, Tarek found Balthazar contemplating the stars. "You seem thoughtful, old friend," Tarek said. Balthazar smiled. "I'm thinking about how a small change can create such large waves. Your transformation, Tarek, has inspired this entire forest to change. This is the true power of leadership." Tarek nodded, feeling a deep gratitude. And to think it all started with a simple invitation to observe a stream. "Thank you, Balthazar, for teaching me to see beyond the obvious." Together, the tiger and the frog watched the sleeping forest, knowing that with each new day, new lessons and challenges would arise. But now they were prepared to face them, united and stronger than ever. As winter reached its peak, the forest of tall pines faced its greatest challenge yet. An unprecedented snowstorm was approaching, threatening everything the animals had built together. Luna, returning from a reconnaissance flight, landed breathlessly in the center of the clearing. "Tarek! Gridlock! Everyone! A massive storm is coming! I've never seen anything like it!" The news spread quickly, causing a wave of concern among the forest's inhabitants. Tarek, feeling the weight of responsibility, knew they needed to act fast. "We need to prepare," he announced, his voice firm but gentle. "Each species has unique abilities. Let's use them to protect everyone." Gridlock, now fully integrated into the community, took the initiative. "My pack can help dig deeper shelters for the smaller animals." Olivia, the matriarch of the deer, added, "We can use our antlers to break branches and create windbreaks." The beavers, led by Dente de Ferro, offered their construction expertise. "We can reinforce the shelters and create channels to direct the melting water." As the plans were made, Tarek noticed Bambi standing at the edge, a thoughtful expression on his face. "What's wrong, Bambi?" the tiger asked. "I'm thinking about the animals in other parts of the forest," replied the young deer. "Those who aren't part of our community yet. We can't let them face the storm alone." Bambi's words struck Tarek deeply. He realized that his responsibility extended beyond the boundaries of his immediate community. "You're absolutely right, Bambi," Tarek said. Turning to the others, he proposed, "We need to send rescue teams to alert and help the other animals in the forest." The proposal was met with enthusiastic approval. Quickly, groups were formed, each combining different species to leverage their unique skills. Luna and other birds volunteered to conduct reconnaissance flights, mapping safe areas and locating animals in danger. The wolves, with their keen sense of smell, would lead the ground teams, guiding them through the dense forest. Nico and his squirrels took charge of spreading the news quickly, leaping from tree to reach even the most remote corners of the forest. As the community mobilized, Balthazar watched with a mix of pride and concern. He called Tarek over. "My young friend," said the old toad, "you've created something extraordinary here. But remember, the true test of a community isn't just how it cares for its own, but how it treats those who aren't part of it yet." Tarek nodded, understanding the depth of Balthazar's words. "You're right. This storm isn't just a threat, but an opportunity to show the true spirit of our community." With renewed determination, Tarek coordinated the efforts. Shelters were reinforced, food supplies were gathered and distributed strategically, and rescue teams set out in all directions. As the sky darkened and the first flakes of snow began to fall, the Pine Heights forest buzzed with coordinated, purposeful activity. Animals that were once rivals now worked side by side, united by a common goal. Tarek, standing atop a hill, watched the scene with a mix of pride and apprehension. He knew that the coming hours would be crucial. The storm would test not just the physical strength of each animal, but also the strength of the bonds they had forged. Gridlock joined him, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. "I never thought I'd say this, Tarek, but I'm proud to be part of this community. Whatever this storm brings, we will face it together." Tarek nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the strength that came from their unity. "Together," he repeated, his voice filled with determination. As the winds began to howl and the snow fell more heavily, Tarek took one last look at the forest that was preparing itself. He saw not just a collection of different species, but a true community, united and resilient. With one last roar of encouragement, Tarek descended the hill to join the others in the final preparations. The storm was coming, but they were ready to face it, not as individuals, but as a united forest. The storm hit the Pine Heights forest with a ferocity never seen before. Howling winds bent century-old trees, snow fell in dense curtains, and the biting cold penetrated to the bone. It was as if nature itself was testing the unity and resilience of the newly formed community. Tarek, in the center of the main clearing, coordinated everyone's efforts. His voice, usually powerful, could barely rise above the roar of the storm. "Stay united, protect the weaker ones." Gridlock and his pack formed a living barrier against the wind, using their bodies to shield the shelters where smaller animals took refuge. The deer, led by Olivia and Bambi, used their antlers to break the ice that threatened to block the entrances of the shelters. Luna and the other birds, unable to fly due to the intense winds, took turns in short, risky flights to check on the storm's progress, braving low and dangerous flights. Amidst the chaos, a cry of alarm pierced the air. "The creek is overflowing," warned Dente de Ferro the beaver. "The dams won't hold." Tarek immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. If the beaver's dams broke, much of the forest would be flooded, putting everything they had built at risk. "We need to reinforce the dams," shouted Tarek. "Who can help?" Without hesitation, animals of all species volunteered. Wolves, deer, squirrels, and even a few brave birds followed Tarek and Dente de Ferro to the creek. The scene they found was terrifying. The normally calm waters had turned into a raging torrent. The dams, the work of generations of beavers, trembled under the pressure. "We need logs and stones," shouted Dente de Ferro, his voice nearly lost in the roar of the water. Tarek did not hesitate. Diving into the icy water, he began pushing fallen logs toward the dams. Gridlock and other wolves followed him, while the deer used their strength to roll large stones. The cold water and strong current threatened to sweep the animals away. In a critical moment, Tarek saw Bambi being carried away by the current. "Bambi!" shouted Tarek, launching himself toward the young deer. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. A young wolf, the same one that had caused trouble earlier, leaped into the water, swimming with all its strength to reach Bambi. Together, the wolf and the deer fought against the current, symbolizing the unlikely union they had achieved. Tarek, witnessing the scene, felt a wave of pride and hope. He roared with all the strength of his lungs, "Look! This is how we will survive, united! It doesn't matter our differences!" Inspired by the scene and Tarek's words, everyone redoubled their efforts. Beavers guided the construction, wolves and deer provided brute strength, while squirrels and birds filled in the gaps with smaller branches and mud. Hours passed in a frantic struggle against the elements. Exhaustion was visible on everyone, but no one gave up. Finally, when it seemed they could endure no more, the storm began to subside. Luna, seizing a break in the clouds, flew high to assess the situation. When she returned, her eyes sparkled with excitement. "The storm is passing, and look, the sunrise!" As if in response to her words, a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the scene of devastation and triumph. Tarek, soaked and exhausted, climbed onto a high rock. All around him, animals of every species, predators and prey, large and small, were united, tired but victorious. "Look at us," Tarek said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "See what we have accomplished together. This storm did not defeat us. It made us stronger." One by one, the animals raised their voices in a chorus of celebration. Wolves howled, birds sang, deer bellowed, a symphony of triumph and unity. Balthazar, who had been sheltered in a safe spot, was brought to the scene. His eyes filled with tears as he saw the results of all their hard work. "Tarek," called the old frog, "come here." As the tiger approached, Balthazar spoke, his voice laden with emotion. "You did more than save this forest from the storm, my young friend. You showed us all the true meaning of community, strength through unity." Tarek, looking around at the tired but smiling faces of all the animals, felt an emotion he could not name. It was not pride in his own actions, but a deep gratitude and humility before what they had all achieved together. "It wasn't just me, Balthazar," Tarek replied softly. "It was all of us. Every animal here is a hero." As the sun rose on the horizon, bathing the forest in a golden light, the inhabitants of Pine Heights gathered, no longer as separate species, but as a united community. They had faced the worst storm of their lives and emerged not just as survivors, but transformed. The forest was damaged, yes, but the spirit of its inhabitants was stronger than ever, and everyone knew that together they could face any challenge that the future might bring. In the weeks that followed the great storm, the forest of Pine Heights underwent a remarkable transformation. What once was a community divided by species and territories had now become a truly integrated and cooperative ecosystem. The rebuilding brought challenges, but also opportunities to strengthen the bonds between the different species. The wolves, once feared, were now seen working side by side with deer and rabbits to rebuild shelters. The beavers taught advanced construction techniques to all interested species, while squirrels coordinated the efficient distribution of food throughout the forest. Tarek, although still respected as a leader, found himself more and more in the role of facilitator rather than decision-maker. He watched with pride as the animals resolved their own conflicts through dialogue and mutual understanding. One day, while walking through the renewed forest, Tarek encountered Bambi and the young wolf who had saved him during the storm. The two, once unlikely friends, were teaching the younglings of various species about the importance of cooperation. "See," Bambi said to the little ones, "our differences do not separate us. They make us stronger when we work together." The wolf nodded, adding, "Each of us has something unique to offer. Together, we can achieve amazing things. Tarek smiled, feeling a wave of emotion seeing how the lessons learned were being passed on to the next generation. Further along, Tarek found Gridlock supervising the creation of new paths through the forest, ensuring that all areas were accessible and safe for all species. "I never thought I'd say this," Gridlock commented upon seeing Tarek, "but I feel like we've finally found a true home here." Tarek nodded, deeply understanding the sentiment. "A home that we built together," he replied. Arriving at the creek, Tarek found Balthazar in his usual spot. The old frog, though weakened by age and the trials of the storm, radiated an aura of contentment. "Ah, Tarek," Balthazar said, his voice soft but clear. "Look around us. Do you see how the forest flourishes? Not just in vegetation, but in spirit." Tarek looked. He saw birds building nests with the help of squirrels, wolves teaching sustainable hunting techniques to young predators, and herbivores sharing knowledge about the best plants for each season. "I see it, Balthazar," Tarek replied, moved. "I see a community that has learned that true strength comes from unity, not division." Balthazar smiled, his eyes shining with wisdom. "And that, my young friend, is the greatest triumph of all. Not only did we survive the storm, we grew through it." As the sun set over the forest of Pine Heights, Tarek reflected on his journey. From a young, solitary, and impatient tiger, he had transformed into a leader who understood the value of community, patience, and collective wisdom. The forest had changed, yes, but more importantly, its inhabitants had changed. And in this transformation, they found not only survival, but true prosperity. Just when you thought the tale had ended, a new story begins. In the heart of the Rocky Mountains, where snow-capped peaks touched the sky and deep valleys echoed with the whispers of the winds, lived Aurora, a magnificent golden eagle. Her shimmering golden feathers glistened in the sunlight, and her penetrating amber eyes seemed capable of seeing into the future. Aurora was known among all the creatures of the mountain as the undisputed queen of the skies. From a young age, Aurora stood out for her ability to fly higher and longer than any other bird. She took pride in her capacity to face the trickiest air currents and the fiercest storms. For Aurora, every flight was an opportunity to prove her superiority. On the highest cliffs of the range, Aurora built her nest, isolated and inaccessible. From there, she observed the world below with a mix of disdain and indifference. Other birds tried to imitate her but always fell behind, unable to reach the heights she considered her exclusive domain. One day, while soaring over a deep canyon, Aurora spotted a small peregrine falcon struggling against an updraft. The falcon, named Zephyr, flapped his wings frantically but seemed unable to gain altitude. Aurora hovered above, watching with curiosity. "Look at that," she thought. "How weak those who aren't meant for the heights are." With a shrill cry, she dove, passing close to the falcon, showcasing her agility and strength. Zephyr, impressed, called out, "Majestic eagle, how do you fly so effortlessly in these treacherous winds?" Aurora arrogantly replied, "It's simple. I am stronger, faster, and more skilled than any other bird. The wind is my servant, and I command it with my will." The falcon tried once more to rise, but was pushed down by the force of the wind. "But how did you learn to control the wind like that?" he asked, out of breath. "I didn't learn," Aurora retorted. "I was born with this power. It's what makes me superior to all other birds." As they spoke, dark clouds began to form on the horizon. The air thickened with the promise of an impending storm. Aurora felt the shift in the atmosphere and decided it was time to show her true mastery. "Watch, little falcon, and learn how a true queen of the skies confronts the fury of nature," she declared, launching herself toward the turbulent clouds. As Aurora ascended, the wind picked up in intensity. Powerful gusts whipped around her feathers, but she continued to climb, determined to prove her dominance over the elements. Lightning illuminated the sky around her, and thunder shook the air. Below, Zephyr watched in awe and concern. He had never seen a bird challenge a storm like that. She must truly be powerful, he thought, to face nature in such a way. Aurora struggled against the increasingly fierce winds, her powerful wings beating with all their might. She was determined to reach the top of the storm, to look down and see the world diminished beneath her wings. But the higher she flew, the more ferocious the storm became. Suddenly, a stronger gust of wind caught her off guard. Aurora was thrown sideways, momentarily losing control. She recovered quickly, but something had changed. For the first time in her life, she felt fear. The wind howled around her, no longer a submissive servant, but a wild and untamable force. Aurora fought to maintain her altitude, her wings burning with effort. She realized with a jolt of understanding that she had gravely underestimated the power of nature. As she struggled against the storm, Aurora began to grasp that her strength alone was not enough. She needed to work with the wind, not against it. This revelation shook her to her core, challenging everything she believed about herself and her place in the world. Below, Zephyr watched anxiously, fearing for the proud eagle's fate. He knew that even the most powerful of birds could not conquer a storm of that magnitude alone. Exhausted and humbled, Aurora began her descent. The storm still roared around her, but now, instead of fighting against it, the eagle tried to flow with the air currents. It was a precarious journey, filled with moments of near fall, but she finally emerged from the stormy clouds. Zephyr flew to meet her, concerned. "Are you okay?" he asked, noticing how Aurora's feathers were ruffled and how tired she looked. Aurora landed heavily on a nearby cliff, her legs trembling from the effort. She looked at Zephyr, and for the first time there was no arrogance in her eyes, only a mix of fear, respect, and newfound understanding. I was wrong," she admitted, her voice hoarse. "The wind is not my servant. It's a force beyond my control." Zephyr landed beside her, offering his presence as comfort. "None of us control the wind," he said softly, "but we can learn to dance with it." Aurora nodded slowly, beginning to understand that there was much more to learn about flying and about life than she had ever imagined. The storm had shaken her certainties, but it had also planted the seeds of new wisdom. In the days that followed the storm, Aurora remained in her nest, reflecting on her experience. The Rocky Mountains, which had once seemed her unquestionable kingdom, now revealed themselves to be a complex and interconnected ecosystem. The scenery around Aurora was breathtaking. Snow-covered peaks rose majestically, cut by lush valleys and crystal-clear rivers. Pine forests spread across the slopes, harboring a diversity of life that Aurora had never truly noticed before. Zephyr, the peregrine falcon, became a constant presence. He brought news from the lowlands and shared stories of his own adventures. Aurora discovered that, despite his smaller size, Zephyr possessed a wisdom and understanding of the wind that she had never imagined possible. "You know, Aurora," Zephyr said one day, gently landing beside her, "every current of air tells a story. The winds blowing from the west carry the scent of the Pacific Ocean, while those from the east bring the aroma of the prairies." Aurora tilted her head, intrigued. "How did you learn all of this?" Zephyr smiled, his eyes shimmering. "By observing, listening, and feeling. The wind is not our enemy, it is our teacher." As they conversed, other birds approached. There was Maple, a red-breasted thrush known for her enchanting melodies, and Sage, an old pygmy owl who rarely left her hollow oak tree in the forest below. Maple hopped excitedly. "Aurora, it's so good to see you here. Are your wings feeling better?" Aurora nodded, a bit embarrassed. "Yes, thank you. I didn't used to pay much attention to the other birds." Sage hooted softly, her wise eyes fixed on Aurora. "Sometimes we need to fall to learn how to truly fly." The old owl's words resonated deeply within Aurora. She began to realize that every creature on the mountain, no matter how small, had its own role and importance. As the days passed, Aurora explored the mountains with new eyes. She watched squirrels storing nuts for the winter, moose grazing in the alpine meadows, and bears fishing for salmon in the sparkling rivers. One day, while flying over a particularly deep gorge, Aurora noticed something unusual. A group of younger eagles was struggling to learn how to fly on the thermal currents. Aurora hesitated. In the past, she would have ignored or mocked their inexperience. Now, something inside her compelled her to help. Descending in wide circles, she approached the group. "You need to feel the wind before you try to master it," she said gently. "Close your eyes for a moment. Feel how it flows around your feathers." The young eagles looked at her in awe, recognizing the legendary Aurora. They followed her instructions, and soon they were gliding with more confidence. That night, back in her nest, Aurora reflected on how her perception of the world had changed. The mountains, which once seemed to exist solely to exalt her greatness, now revealed themselves as an intricate tapestry of life and beauty. Zephyr landed quietly beside her. "You look thoughtful," he observed. Aurora nodded. "I'm starting to understand what you meant about dancing with the wind. It's not just about flying, is it? It's about how we live, how we relate to everything around us." Zephyr smiled. "Exactly. And you know what? You've always been an incredible dancer, Aurora. You just needed to find the right rhythm." As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of gold and purple, Aurora felt a peace she had never experienced before. She had begun her journey as a solitary queen, but now she found herself part of something much larger and more wonderful than she had ever imagined. The wind blew gently, caressing her feathers, and Aurora knew her true adventure was only just beginning. As Aurora embraced her new understanding of the world, an unexpected challenge arose on the horizon. One morning, Zephyr arrived breathless at Aurora's nest, his feathers ruffled from haste. "Aurora, something is wrong in the lowlands," he said, catching his breath. "The winds are changing strangely, and many birds are having difficulty migrating." Aurora frowned, concerned. "What do you mean, Zephyr? What's happening exactly?" Zephyr explained that the warm air currents that normally guided migratory birds had become erratic and unpredictable. Entire flocks were getting lost, exhausted, and disoriented. "We need to do something," Aurora declared, her old confidence mixed with a new humility. "But what? We can't control the winds." At that moment, Sage, the old owl, arrived silently. "Perhaps we can't control the winds," she said softly, "but we can learn to read them better than any other creature." Aurora nodded slowly, an idea beginning to form in her mind. What if we used our knowledge to guide the other birds? The news of the crisis spread quickly through the mountains. Birds of all species gathered to discuss the problem. Aurora, who would have commanded the situation with inflexible authority in the past, now listened attentively to every opinion. Maple, the melodic thrush, suggested using songs to communicate directions to the lost flocks. A group of swallows proposed creating a network of observation posts along the migratory routes. However, as the debate continued, tensions began to rise. Some birds blamed the eagles for not noticing the problem earlier. Others disagreed about the best way to help. Aurora observed, feeling the weight of responsibility. She knew she needed to act, but she also understood that her old authoritative approach wouldn't work. "Friends," she finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Each of us has unique abilities. We can't solve this alone, but together, perhaps we can make a difference." She proposed a plan. The eagles, with their keen eyesight and ability to fly high, would serve as sentinels, observing the wind patterns on a grand scale. The falcons, agile and swift, would act as messengers. The owls would use their wisdom to interpret changes in the winds, while the songbirds would help guide the flocks with their melodies. The plan was met with general approval, but soon new challenges arose. Some older birds resisted the idea of changing their traditional routes. Others feared that helping the migratory flocks could deplete local resources. Aurora faced these concerns with patience and empathy, qualities she had never before demonstrated. "I understand your fears," she said to a group of worried sparrows, "but remember, the winds that bring change today may affect us tomorrow. By helping others, we are preparing for the future." As the plan was put into action, Aurora led by example. She flew for hours on end, mapping air currents and guiding exhausted flocks to safe resting areas. Her body ached from the effort, but she felt a satisfaction she had never experienced during her days of solitary glory. One day, while guiding a particularly tired flock of geese, Aurora encountered a treacherous air current. The wind changed abruptly, threatening to scatter the flock. For a moment, Aurora's old instincts screamed at her to abandon the others and save herself. But something had shifted within her. Instead of fleeing, Aurora flew to the center of the flock, using her powerful wings to create a pocket of calmer air. "Follow me," she shouted above the roar of the wind. "Together we can get through this." The geese, inspired by her courage, gathered around her. Together they fought against the wind, each flap of their wings strengthening their collective determination. When they finally emerged from the turbulence, exhausted but triumphant, Aurora felt an emotion she had never felt before. It was not the solitary pride of her past achievements, but a deep, shared joy. Back in the mountains, news of Aurora's actions spread quickly. Birds that had once feared or envied her now looked at her with respect and gratitude. Zephyr found Aurora resting after her epic flight. "You've really changed," he observed softly. Aurora looked toward the horizon, where another flock of migratory birds was approaching. "No," she replied with a smile. "I've just learned how to truly fly." As the sun set, painting the sky with vibrant colors, Aurora knew that the challenges were far from over. The winds remained unpredictable, and many birds still needed help. But for the first time, she did not feel alone in the vastness of the sky. Instead, she felt part of something greater, a community united by the wind and the sky they all shared. Now, more aware of the importance of the wind, Aurora began to observe how other animals in the mountain range interacted with the forces of nature. She noticed a young peregrine falcon named Nico, who was struggling to learn how to fly properly. Unlike Aurora, Nico feared the strong winds and avoided flying at higher altitudes. Intrigued, Aurora decided to approach the falcon. "Why do you fear what can help you?" she asked, hovering near Nico's nest. The falcon, surprised by the approach of the imposing eagle, replied hesitantly, "The winds are treacherous. I've seen many of my companions get swept away by them." This conversation sparked a new purpose in Aurora. She realized she could use her recent experiences to help others overcome their fears and limitations. Thus, Aurora began to mentor Nico, teaching him how to feel the wind and use it to his advantage. Meanwhile, in the plains below the mountain range, a troubling situation was unfolding. A prolonged drought threatened the lives of many terrestrial animals. Among them was an old tortoise named Sabia, known for her extraordinary memory and knowledge of the seasons. Sabia knew that in the past, periods of drought were always followed by abundant rains. However, this time, something felt different. The clouds were forming, but the rain did not fall. The tortoise suspected that something in the mountains might be interfering with the natural water cycle. One day, when Aurora was flying over the plains in search of food, she heard the laments of thirsty animals. Curious, she descended and found Sabia, who told her about the drought and her suspicions. "The mountains hold secrets," said Sabia. "Perhaps you, who fly so high, can discover what is preventing the rain from falling." Touched by the plight of the animals in the plains and intrigued by the mystery, Aurora decided to investigate. She realized that this mission could be a perfect opportunity for Nico to overcome his fears and become a skilled flyer. "Nico," Aurora called upon returning to the mountain range. I have a challenge for us. The animals in the plains need our help. The young falcon, still hesitant but inspired by Aurora's confidence, agreed to accompany her. Together, they began to explore the highest and most remote parts of the mountains, facing increasingly strong and unpredictable winds. During their explorations, Aurora and Nico discovered a strange phenomenon. In a high valley between the tallest peaks, huge ice formations seemed to be diverting the air currents that normally carried rain clouds to the plains. "This is it!" exclaimed Aurora. "The ice is changing the course of the winds. We need to find a way to break these formations." Nico, who had gained confidence during the journey, suggested, "What if we use the wind itself to help us? Perhaps we can direct warm air currents to melt the ice." Nico's idea impressed Aurora. She realized that the young falcon had not only overcome his fear, but was also thinking creatively, using the wind as an ally. Together, they devised a plan. Aurora would use her strength to create turbulence that would draw warm air from the plains, while Nico, with his newfound agility, would guide those currents toward the ice formations. The challenge was immense and would require both to push their limits to the maximum. Aurora knew they would need to rely not only on their own abilities, but also on each other, and above all, on the strength of the wind they had once feared. As they prepared to execute their audacious plan, the pressure of time was mounting. In the plain below, the animals anxiously gazed at the sky, their hopes resting on the two brave birds who had promised to bring the rain back. Aurora and Nico began their daring mission at dawn. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, trapped above the ice formations, unable to follow their natural course to the thirsty plains. The two birds soared upward, facing increasingly strong winds as they approached the frozen valley. "Remember, Nico!" Aurora shouted above the roar of the wind. "Don't fight it! Feel the flow and let it guide you!" Nico nodded, his eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. Together, they dove toward the first ice formation, their wings slicing through the cold mountain air. Aurora started flapping her powerful wings in a circular pattern, creating a vortex of air. The effort was immense, and she could feel every muscle in her body protesting against the superhuman strain. Nico, on the other hand, zigzagged through the sky, guiding warmer air currents from the plains into the whirlwind created by Aurora. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The ice formations remained still, seemingly immune to the efforts of the two birds. Aurora felt a pang of doubt. What if they were wrong? What if they couldn't change something so vast and imposing? Then something unexpected occurred. A sharp sound, like the cracking of a branch, echoed through the valley. A small fissure appeared at the base of one of the ice formations. "It's working!" Nico shouted, his voice brimming with excitement. Encouraged, Aurora and Nico redoubled their efforts. The eagle flew faster, her circles becoming a blur of motion. Nico dove and climbed, guiding the warm air currents with a precision he never imagined he could possess. The fissures in the ice multiplied, growing and intertwining like a web. Suddenly, with a deafening roar, a large section of the ice formation broke away, crashing down into the valley below. The ice's fall created a shockwave in the air, catching Aurora and Nico off guard. The turbulence threw them far apart, and Aurora saw in horror that Nico was being dragged toward a rock wall. Without a second thought, Aurora dove toward the young falcon. Everything she had learned about working with the wind, not against it, was put to the test in that critical moment. She allowed herself to be carried by the air current, subtly adjusting the position of her wings to gain speed. At the last second, Aurora reached Nico, wrapping him in her powerful wings and using her own body as a shield against the rapidly approaching rock. The impact was violent, and for a terrifying moment both birds lost consciousness. When Aurora opened her eyes, she found herself lying on a rocky ledge, with Nico nestled safely under her wing. The young falcon looked at her with a mix of admiration and concern. You saved me," Nico stammered, his voice trembling with emotion. Aurora smiled weakly. "We saved each other," she replied. "And together, we've saved so much more." As they spoke, a low and constant sound began to fill the air. Aurora and Nico looked up in astonishment to see that the previously trapped clouds were now moving freely, descending toward the plains. Rain began to fall, first in gentle drops, and then in a steady downpour. The sound of water hitting the rocks and flowing through the valleys was like a symphony of relief and renewal. Aurora and Nico watched in awe as the landscape around them transformed. Long dry streams began to bubble again, and the fresh scent of wet earth wafted up from the plains below. In that moment, Aurora had an epiphany. She realized that her journey of learning was far from over. What had begun as a lesson in humility and respect for the wind had transformed into something much greater. She had learned about the power of collaboration, the importance of overcoming fears, and above all, the impact their actions could have on the world around them. Nico, observing the thoughtful expression on Aurora's face, asked, "What will we do now?" Aurora looked at the young falcon, seeing in him no longer a hesitant pupil, but a valuable partner and friend. "Now," she said, "we go home. But this time, we fly not as master and student, but as equals. We have much to teach each other, and even more to learn from the world around us." As they prepared to fly back, Aurora felt a profound change within herself. The pride that once defined her had been replaced by something richer and more meaningful, a sense of purpose and connection to everything around her. She knew this adventure was just the beginning. The sky, which had once been her solitary domain, now opened like a vast field of possibilities and shared discoveries. Aurora landed softly on a rocky cliff, her feathers still ruffled from the transformative experience. The wind, now gentler, caressed her wings, as if recognizing the change in her heart. All around, other birds watched with curiosity, sensing something different in the posture of the once proud eagle. A young falcon named Zephyr approached hesitantly. "Aurora," he chirped, "you seem different. What happened up there?" The eagle took a deep breath, her eyes shining with newfound wisdom. "Zephyr, I discovered that I'm not as powerful as I once thought. The wind, which I always saw as an adversary, is actually our greatest ally." Aurora's words echoed across the cliff, drawing the attention of other birds. A flock of pigeons, led by a wise dove named Iris, landed nearby. "Tell us more, Aurora," Iris requested, her voice soft but filled with interest. Aurora spread her wings, demonstrating how the wind lifted her. "For years, I thought my strength was all that mattered. But today, I faced a wind so powerful that it made me realize my own insignificance. It was then that I understood. We are not fighting against the wind. We are dancing with it." The birds around her murmured in agreement, some nodding their heads, others exchanging meaningful glances. Zephyr, inspired, took a leap and soared in a small circle. "So if we work with the wind instead of against it, we can fly higher and longer?" "Exactly," Aurora exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. "And it's not just about flying. It's about understanding our place in the world, recognizing that we are part of something greater." Aurora's words had a profound effect on the bird community. In the days that followed, a remarkable change occurred in the mountains. Birds of all species began to observe the wind more closely, learning to read its nuances and move in harmony with its currents. Iris, the wise dove, noticed another significant transformation. "Aurora," she said one day, "you've not only changed the way we fly, but also how we relate to one another." Aurora tilted her head, intrigued. "How so, Iris?" "Look," Iris pointed with her wing. In the distance, a diverse group of birds, eagles, hawks, doves, and even small sparrows, flew together in formation, helping one another navigate the air currents. By understanding that we depend on the wind, we've also realized that we depend on each other, Iris explained. The larger birds are protecting the smaller ones from the strongest gusts, while the smaller ones help locate the best currents. It's a dance of cooperation. Aurora felt her heart swell with joy and humility. Her experience had not only transformed her, but was changing the entire avian community. The mountains, once a place of fierce competition and isolation, were becoming an example of cooperation and mutual respect. Zephyr, who had become an eager disciple of Aurora, landed beside her. "Aurora, you've become more than just a great flyer. You've become a leader, a teacher." Aurora smiled gently. "No, Zephyr, I've become a student. The wind is our teacher, and together we're all learning its lessons." Aurora's words resonated through the mountains, carried by the wind to every corner of the sky. The lesson of humility and cooperation was transforming not only how the birds flew, but also how they lived and related to one another. As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Aurora looked out at the horizon with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew her journey of learning was just beginning, and that each new day would bring opportunities to grow, share, and marvel at the lessons of the wind. As the days went by, Aurora faced new challenges that tested her newly acquired wisdom. One morning, a flock of wild geese arrived at the mountain range, exhausted and disoriented. Their migration route had been altered by unexpected climate changes, and now they were lost in unfamiliar territory. Aurora, who would have previously ignored the situation, felt compelled to help. She flew to the flock, her powerful wings cutting through the air with renewed grace. "Welcome to our mountain range," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. "I can see you are tired and confused. How can I help?" The leader of the geese, a grey-feathered male named Gale, looked at Aurora with a mix of hope and distrust. "We need to find a safe place to rest and regroup," he explained. "But we don't know these mountains, and the winds here can be treacherous." Aurora nodded, understanding the dilemma. "I know of a sheltered valley not far from here," she offered. "I can guide you there." As she led the flock through the maze of peaks and valleys, Aurora realized she was applying her new understanding of the wind in ways she had never imagined. She wasn't just flying with the wind, she was reading it, anticipating its changes, and using it to help the weary geese conserve energy. When they arrived at the valley, Gale expressed his gratitude. "You not only showed us the way," he said, "but you taught us a new way to fly." "How did you learn all this?" Aurora smiled, recalling her own journey. "I learned that true strength lies not in fighting against the world, but in working in harmony with it," she replied. In the days that followed, Aurora dedicated herself to helping the geese recover and prepare to continue their journey. She led them to areas rich in food, taught them techniques for navigating the mountain winds, and shared stories about the region. During this time, Aurora noticed that Zephyr, the young hawk who had once admired her from afar, was starting to imitate her, trying to help the geese in his own way. Although his intentions were good, his inexperience sometimes caused more problems than solutions. One day, Zephyr attempted to guide a small group of geese through a narrow canyon, but he didn't notice a dangerous air current. Aurora saw the imminent danger and quickly flew to intercept them. With skillful maneuvers, she redirected the group to a safer route, narrowly avoiding disaster. After the incident, Zephyr landed beside Aurora, his feathers trembling with embarrassment and frustration. "I just wanted to help, like you do," he said, downcast. "But it seems I'm not good enough." Aurora looked at the young hawk with understanding. "Zephyr," she said softly, "you have a generous heart, and that is more important than any flying skill. True leadership is not just about being the strongest or most skilled. It's about continuously learning and genuinely caring for others." Inspired by the situation, Aurora decided to create a training program for the younger birds of the mountain range. She would teach them not only to fly with the wind, but also to understand the interconnectedness of all living beings. As the lessons progressed, Aurora realized that she was growing just as much as her students. Each question they asked challenged her to think more deeply, and every obstacle they faced together forced her to find new solutions. One day, as she watched Zephyr successfully lead a small group in a training flight, Aurora felt a wave of pride and accomplishment. She had not only overcome her own arrogance, but had also found a way to turn that lesson into something that benefited the entire community. Gale, who had decided to stay in the mountain range with some of his companions, approached Aurora. "You've transformed this mountain," he said. "It's no longer just a place of wild beauty, but a home where different species learn and grow together." Aurora reflected on Gale's words, realizing how far she had come since that fateful day when she faced the storm. Her journey of growth was not over. She knew there was still much to learn. But now she understood that every challenge was an opportunity to grow, and every encounter a chance to teach and be taught. As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink, Aurora took flight with Zephyr and her other students. Together, they danced in the evening's air currents, their wings in perfect harmony with the wind and with one another. It was a living demonstration of Aurora's most important lesson, that true greatness comes not from domination, but from cooperation and mutual understanding. Now aware of her connection to the wind, Aurora began to observe the world around her with new eyes. The clouds on the horizon were swelling, heralding a storm of unprecedented proportions in the mountain range. The animals of the mountain, from the small rodents to the robust bears, were seeking shelter, sensing the change in the atmosphere. The eagle, who would have once seen the storm as a personal challenge, now felt a greater responsibility. She knew her newfound understanding could be crucial for everyone's survival. With renewed determination, Aurora took flight, planning to alert the various animal communities spread across the mountain range. As she flew, Aurora noticed that the wind, although strong, guided her with surprising precision. She let herself be carried by rising air currents, conserving energy and gaining altitude quickly. In her journey, she spotted a flock of geese struggling against the gale, clearly disoriented and exhausted. Approaching them, Aurora called out, "Follow me! Don't fight the wind, let it guide you." Initially skeptical, the geese hesitated. But seeing how easily Aurora navigated the air currents, they decided to trust her. One by one, the geese fell in line behind her, forming the characteristic V formation. To their surprise, they immediately felt their effort decrease as they gained speed and stability. Aurora led them to a sheltered valley where they could wait out the storm in safety. Before departing, the leader of the geese approached her. "You taught us a valuable lesson today. We always thought our strength lay in fighting against the elements, but now we see that true wisdom lies in working in harmony with them." The eagle nodded, recognizing that she had learned this lesson recently as well. With time running short, Aurora set off to continue her mission. As the storm approached, the eagle flew back and forth across the mountain range, alerting different groups of animals. She guided the deer to seek shelter in the higher caves, directed the rabbits to deep, safe burrows, and advised the bears on the best spots to protect themselves. In every encounter, Aurora not only offered practical guidance, but also shared her new perspective on the importance of working in harmony with nature rather than trying to dominate it. Her message resonated deeply, provoking a shift in mindset among the mountain's inhabitants. As she fulfilled her mission, Aurora felt increasingly connected, not just to the wind, but to the entire web of life in the mountain range. She began to understand that her true strength did not lie in her ability to fly higher or faster, but in her capacity to unite and protect the community. The sky was rapidly darkening, and the first lightning flashes streaked across the horizon. Aurora knew she had little time before the storm reached its peak. With one last effort, she flew to the highest peak of the mountain range, where she could have a panoramic view of the entire region. From there, she witnessed the results of her efforts, Animals of all species moving in harmony, seeking shelter and helping one another. It was a scene of unprecedented unity and cooperation. As the wind howled around her, Aurora realized she was about to face her greatest challenge. The approaching storm was not just a test of her own strength and newly discovered wisdom, but an opportunity to lead the entire mountain community through an unprecedented crisis. With the first raindrops falling on her feathers, Aurora prepared for the decisive moment. She knew her actions in the next few moments would define not only her own fate, but that of all the beings who now counted on her. The eagle took a deep breath, feeling the power of the wind in her feathers. It was time for the climax, and she was ready to face it not as a solitary conqueror, but as part of something much larger than herself. The storm hit the mountain range with unimaginable fury. Howling winds lashed the slopes, uprooting centuries-old trees. Lightning slashed through the darkened sky, briefly illuminating the chaos that had settled in. Torrents of rain poured from the clouds, transforming once tranquil streams into violent torrents. Aurora hovered at the eye of the storm, her soaked feathers clinging to her body. Despite the terror of the situation, she remained calm, her keen eyes scanning the terrain below. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air, momentarily overriding the roar of the wind. Without hesitation, Aurora dove toward the sound. Through the curtain of rain, she spotted a group of young mountain goats trapped on a steep slope, the ground around them rapidly crumbling due to the erosion caused by the water. Aurora knew she couldn't rescue the goats alone. She would need to use all the wisdom she had acquired. Quickly, she soared down to a group of bears sheltering in a nearby cave. "We need your strength," she shouted. "There are goats trapped on the east slope." The bears, who typically wouldn't involve themselves, felt the urgency in Aurora's voice. Led by a grey bear named Grizzo, they followed the eagle to the landslide site. Meanwhile, Aurora flew to a group of beavers, taking refuge in a nearby valley. "Your building skills are needed," she explained quickly. "We need to create a barrier to contain the mud." Inspired by Aurora's courage, the beavers bravely swam against the current, carrying branches and logs. Back at the slope, Aurora orchestrated a coordinated effort. The bears, using their impressive strength, began moving large boulders to create a stable base. The beavers, working with incredible precision even under the torrential rain, wove branches and logs together, forming an improvised barrier. Aurora flew from group to group, guiding, encouraging, and, most importantly, helping everyone work in harmony with the elements rather than fighting against them. "Don't resist the water," she shouted to the beavers. "Use your strength to guide it." To the bears, she called out, "Feel the rhythm of the mountain. Move with it, not against it." And to the frightened goats, she urged, "Trust the ground beneath your feet. It is a part of you, just as you are a part of it." Gradually, an incredible transformation took place. The animals, inspired by Aurora's words, began moving in harmony not only with one another, but also with the storm itself. The bears found footholds that seemed to fit perfectly under their paws. The beavers channeled the water's strength to reinforce their construction instead of battling it. At the height of the chaos, when it appeared that the mountain would collapse under the fury of the elements, something extraordinary happened. Aurora, flying at the heart of the storm, felt a deep connection with the wind like never before. It was as if she could hear the voice of nature itself. With sudden clarity, she understood what needed to be done. Aurora began to fly in a specific pattern, her wings slicing through the air with precision. To everyone's astonishment, the wind around her began to change direction. "Follow my example," she shouted to a group of hawks sheltering nearby. The hawks, witnessing Aurora's incredible display, joined her in the sky. Together, they created a whirlwind of air that began to divert the worst part of the storm away from the threatened slope. On the ground, the goats finally found a safe path, guided by the barrier created by the bears and beavers. As the last animal reached stable ground, a feeling of collective achievement washed over all present. The storm, as if acknowledging the unity and harmony demonstrated by the animals, began to lose strength. The rain lessened, the winds calmed, and rays of sunlight started to break through the clouds. Aurora landed gently on a prominent rock, exhausted but radiant. Around her, animals of all kinds, prey and predator, large and small, gathered in a truce born from shared adversity. Grizzo, the grey bear, approached Aurora. "You didn't just save us," he said in his deep voice. "You taught us a new way of living." Aurora looked at the assembly of animals, her eyes shining with emotion. "It wasn't just me," she replied softly. "It was the wind, the mountain, the rain. It was all of us, together. Today, we didn't conquer the storm. We danced with it." A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. In that moment, everyone understood that they had participated in something truly transformative. Aurora's lesson on harmony and interconnection was no longer just an idea. It was a lived reality, etched in every heart present. As the sun set, painting the sky with vibrant colors after the storm, Aurora knew this was not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a new era for the mountain range and all its inhabitants. In the days following the great storm, a remarkable change swept through the mountain range. Aurora's lesson on harmony and cooperation had deeply touched every animal that witnessed or participated in the extraordinary event. Predators, who once hunted indiscriminately, now showed a new respect for the balance of nature. Wolves and deer could be seen drinking from the same stream, not in a tense truce, but in peaceful coexistence born of mutual understanding. Birds of different species began to fly together, sharing knowledge about air currents and migratory routes. The small rodents, once fearful of venturing out of their burrows, now actively contributed to the community, helping plant seeds and preserve the ecosystem. Aurora, once solitary in her pride, became a respected and beloved leader. She flew daily over the mountain range, not to display her strength, but to check on the well-being of all the inhabitants. Your nest, once an isolated and inaccessible place, has transformed into a gathering point where animals of all species come to seek advice and share stories. The impact of this transformation extended beyond the borders of the mountain range. Travelers, migratory birds, animals searching for new territories carried the tales of the eagle who danced with the wind to distant lands. In forests, prairies, and far-off mountains, Aurora's message inspired other communities to seek harmony with nature and with one another. The mountain range itself seemed to respond to this change. The seasons flowed more smoothly, and the storms, while still powerful, felt less destructive. It was as if the mountain and its inhabitants had found a common rhythm, a shared dance with the elements. On a golden autumn afternoon, Aurora perched on the highest peak, gazing down at the valley below. She saw bears helping beavers build sturdier dams, wolves teaching rabbits to detect dangers by scenting the wind, and hawks guiding mixed flocks of birds in formations that sliced through the air with grace and efficiency. In that moment, Aurora felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Her personal journey of overcoming pride and discovering true strength in cooperation had blossomed into something much greater. She had not only transformed herself, but had catalyzed a change throughout the community. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Aurora understood that this was not an end, but a new beginning. Each day would bring new challenges, new opportunities to learn and grow together. The lesson of the wind, to flow, adapt, and work in harmony, would continue to guide them, just as the currents of air guided their wings. With a powerful and joyful cry, Aurora launched herself into the evening sky, and as if responding to her call, hundreds of voices joined in a chorus that echoed through the mountains, a celebration of unity, wisdom, and the beauty of flying together. Years passed, and the story of Aurora became a legend, passed down from generation to generation. Travelers from distant lands came to the mountain range to witness the unique harmony among its inhabitants. Though Aurora eventually departed to the eternal winds, her legacy lived on. On a clear morning, a young eaglet opened its wings for the first time. Feeling the wind caressing its feathers, it did not feel fear, but a deep connection. Without hesitation, it launched into the sky, not to conquer it, but to dance with it, carrying with it the spirit of Aurora. My little one, the story of Aurora teaches us that true strength lies not in domination but in harmony. Just as the eagle learned to dance with the wind, we too can learn to live in balance with the world around us. How about reflecting on how you can apply this lesson in your life? Think of ways to cooperate with others, to respect nature, to find strength in unity. Share your ideas with friends and family. Together, we can create our own dance with the wind, transforming our world one small act of harmony at a time. Good night, my dear ones. Rest well, and remember that tomorrow we'll have more stories to share.